TV7 Israel News is made possible thanks to your generous donation. Shalom ve'erev tov, good evening. Welcome to our daily TV7 Israel News Bulletin, broadcast from Jerusalem. A growing number of countries are calling on their citizens to depart the Islamic Republic of Iran as soon as possible. Russia and Iran conduct a joint naval exercise in the Strait of Hormuz. Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar tells the United Nations that Israel would never relinquish its sovereignty over Jerusalem. A growing number of countries are calling on their citizens to depart the Islamic Republic of Iran immediately, warning that within the next few dozens of hours, it may well be too late. Among others, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk emphasized the urgency behind his call, stressing that in the very near future, the possibility of evacuation will be out of the question.
In a dozen, or even a few dozen hours, the possibility of evacuation will be out of the question. I mean, please take this very seriously. We have bad experiences in the past, and some people ignore these appeals and information, so I want to emphasize once again, please leave Iran immediately or refrain from traveling to that country, as no one will be able to guarantee evacuation in the event of a heated conflict.
President Donald Trump convened his security cabinet last night, during the course of which they had discussed the situation vis-à-vis Iran at length. Subsequently, U.S. officials familiar with the details of the discussions briefed a number of reporters who had acknowledged that the balance is rapidly tilting towards a military option, which, according to the officials, could be executed within the next 72 hours alone. In tandem, non-essential U.S. military personnel and their families have reportedly been advised to depart from a number of countries in the region. It is worth noting that in the past 24 hours alone, over 50 additional U.S. aircraft arrived at a number of bases throughout the Middle East, effectively evolving into the largest U.S. military deployment in the region since the 2003 Iraq War. Meanwhile, in the Persian Gulf, the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Navy hosted a Russian naval vessel for the purpose of conducting a joint military exercise. According to the IRGC's naval spokesman, the exercise was one of three separate exercises which the IRGC Navy participated in recent weeks.
The naval forces of the Army of the Islamic Republic of Iran routinely conduct various exercises around the world within the framework of defense diplomacy programs. These include exercises such as the BRICS naval drill held in southern Africa, from which our naval group is currently returning. Our next naval group is presently taking part in the Milan exercise hosted by India in Visakhapatnam. Joint exercises with Russia are also part of our regular planning, both in the Caspian Sea and in southern waters, and are carried out annually within the framework of defense diplomacy activities.
Turning to the United Nations headquarters in New York, where the World Body Security Council held an emergency session in which the majority of member states deplored the Israeli cabinet's decision to end a decades-old practice of refusing Israeli ownership over territories in Judea, Samaria, and the Jordan Valley, to include East Jerusalem.
Palestine belongs to the Palestinian people. It is not up for grabs, and it is not for sale. It is not a land without a people. And despite all its efforts, Israel will not transform us into a people without a land. The latest Israeli decisions mean we have reached the end of the road. Now annexation is in full display. Unchallenged, it will define our region's future and doom it.
Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, who represented the State of Israel in the meeting, responded to the blatant lies and historic revisionism aimed at revoking any type of Jewish connection to the so-called West Bank districts of Judea and Samaria.
Ladies and gentlemen, around 4,000 years ago, our patriarch Abraham lived and walked in ancient Hebron, Beersheba, and Beit El. Over 3,000 years ago, King David established Jerusalem as our capital. Jewish presence in the land of Israel, even throughout our long exile, has never ceased for even a day. In the history of nations and states, this is probably the clearest case of proven and documented historic rights of any nation to any land. Amazingly, there are so many powers trying to replace historical truth with modern lies. The truth is simple. We are the indigenous people in the land of Israel. The archaeological findings in our ancient sites, including the city of David, the Western Wall tunnels, and others, tell the history of our land. This jug handle is from the kingdom of Judea, 2,700 years ago. It has a stamp of the Jewish king on it. This coin, this little coin, from nearly 2,000 years ago, says freedom for Zion. Found in the Judean desert, it was minted during the second year of the Great Jewish Revolt against the Romans. How can Jewish presence in our ancient homeland violate international law? It's a contradiction in terms.
Jerusalem's top diplomat further addressed the remarks by British Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, who, while presiding over the UN Security Council meeting, essentially decreed that Jews living in Judea and Samaria are illegally doing so under international law.
Madam Secretary, in 1917, the British government issued the historic Balfour Declaration in order to re-establish a national home for the Jewish people in our land. The same places, in the heart of our ancient homeland, you claim the Jews are forbidden to live in, and that allegedly violate international law, you recognized as belonging to national home for the Jewish people. I want to present a map of the British mandate, but I'll first make a disclaimer for the Jordanian Foreign Minister I know is about to come. We have no claim over Transjordan. I want it to be clear. But this is the map of the Balfour Declaration of the British Mandate. Here is Judea and Samaria. Some of you call it the West Bank. In 1921, then Secretary of State for the Colonies, Winston Churchill, said on a visit to the land of Israel, "It is manifestly right that the Jews should have a national home. And where else could that be but in this land with which for more than 3,000 years they have been intimately and profoundly associated?" In 1922, the UN's predecessor, the League of Nations Council, tasked Britain with re-establishing a Jewish national home. Madam President, what have you left of the lofty historical tradition of Balfour and Churchill? The claim that Israelis cannot live in Judea and Samaria isn't just inconsistent with international law and Britain's own Balfour Declaration. It is morally distorted. How can Jews be allowed to live in London, Paris, or New York, but not in the cradle of our own civilization, ancient Jerusalem, which you call East Jerusalem, Shiloh, Hebron, and Beit El?
With regard to the long list of condemnations against Israel's efforts to enable registration of lands that do not have any legal ownership throughout Judea and Samaria, Minister Sa'ar pointed out to the Palestinian practices that have been spearheaded by Ramallah and its patrons in unabashed violation of past agreements between Israel and the Palestinian leadership.
Nearly 300 structures were built per month only in 2025 by Palestinians in Area C. Massive illegal building. It's blatant violation of our agreements. Yet you aren't saying a word about it. The condemnations are reserved solely for building intended for Jewish communities. How many of you condemned the PA's racist death penalty for anyone who sells real estate to Jews? Do you believe it exists in 2026, death penalty for selling real estate for Jews? Jordanian law, which applies to what you call the West Bank, forbids the sale of real estate to any non-Arabs, Jews or non-Jews, American, Chinese, Russian. How many of you that condemned Israel's cabinet decision last week to cancel it really believe that a racist law like this should exist in 2026? What choice did we have other than correcting these twisted injustices by establishing equality and transparency in real estate transactions in Judea and Samaria? Is this annexation? Our cabinet decision also protects the property rights of Israelis and Palestinians alike. Dear members, the international community turns a blind eye to the PA's ongoing practices and violations. This only pushes a solution to the conflict further away. You invented a so-called state of Palestine as if such a state exists or ever existed. But the truth, for over 3,000 years since King David, Jerusalem has been the Jewish people's eternal capital, and it will remain so forever.
Thank you for watching TV7 Israel News, which is made possible by the generosity of our viewers. Please keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem and redemption of Israel. I'm Jonathan Hassan, wishing you an Erev Mevorach, and God willing, until our next update, Shalom from Jerusalem.